Good morning all. I recently made a video where I took apart this Ozito cordless Worklight. It's relatively simple. There's a little LED driver board in there with a bridge rectifier, curiously. 3 LEDs in series and a power switch. Not complicated. And there weren't really any challenges in taking this thing apart. But putting this thing back together again, oh, that was a very different story. That was extraordinarily difficult. And I did shoot some video of me putting this back together. And I have those shots here for you today, which I thought you might enjoy. So here's my video shots of trying to get this £8 light. It really wasn't particularly worth it. Back together again. Enjoy. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this link that's on the, well, I suppose it's the top side of the board. It's the non-track side of the board, because that link just makes it very difficult to get this in there. It goes in, but it's a tight interference fit, and I'm pretty sure it's that link that's causing it. And I can't see any reason why that should be tight in there, because the battery connector rattles around, so why not the circuit board? So that link's coming out and going over the top, joining these two parts together. So I've trapped my knife under there, and then I'll get the soldering iron on there and wiggle that link out. This is a single-sided board, so it should be very easy. I'm not sure whether it's lead free though. I think it probably has to be, so I'm going to need to remake these joints with a leaded solder. Right, that's better. That just slides in there now. Now the second thing I want to do is this also slides in next to it. So I want to, in effect, join these two together. So I'll use a fairly thick piece of stranded wire from the negative terminal of the battery to the point on the board. So these kind of behave as one, but there will be a little bit of room for flexibility. But rather than this very flexible cable, I just want to have a nice solid piece. So I've solder sucked these 4 pads. I'm just going to remake them with leaded solder, so I can solder my wires on a little bit more easily. They look very nice. So thick wire, I think this is my 17 amp stuff. It doesn't need to be 17 amps of course, but I just want to get this relatively rigid from the minus input on the board. That goes to the bridge of course, from the minus input connector on this thing. Pretty sure that's minus and that's plus. Can't see very well at the moment. So the little battery connector block and the PCB are now effectively one. There's a little bit of play in there, but they slide into this piece. This is still quite hot. Together like so. And it's just a bit more easy to work when these are effectively just one piece. So yeah, pleased with that. Now I don't really like the way the wire runs through this hole, and then there's a sort of 180-degree slot on the inside, because this turns of course with the other piece, and then just sort of runs along this slot here, and it just strikes me that it'd be very difficult to preform the wire in the right orientation. So I want to actually drill a hole through these bulkheads, these 2 bulkheads, so the wires run right down into this bottom chamber and then come round in a big loop and attach back onto this thing, because they actually attach onto the battery connector and this positive point. Those are the wires for the switch, and they go down this side, so I want them to come right around here like this and then into this hinge mechanism. So let's get my wires cut and ready. Now in order to do this properly, I need to remove this rotating hinge, and you'll see at a certain point that the ball bearing becomes exposed, so I've got to just trap that so it doesn't fly across the room. There's the ball bearing. I'll stick it onto that bit of magnet. There's the spring that can stick onto the bit of magnet, and now the rotating piece can come out. And I have filed these because one of them was a bit tight, and so I filed it down and then cleaned it off. Then I thought I'll just give the other one a bit of roughing up, but when I roughed it up it actually seemed to get tighter, because I think I created effectively a larger diameter, and that made it even more tight. So then that had to be filed and smoothed and sanded, and it all took ages. So now I'm going to drill through at this angle, at a slight angle that way, so that we come through the bulkheads and appear in this chamber where the circuit board is, a little bit inwards, so that I can then route the wires around and onto the connection points. So this is probably going to be a bit tricky. Right, here's a problem. I haven't got enough shaft length beyond the hex piece to actually get as far in as I'd like. Can I show how far it's got? It's got through one bulkhead, but I've got effectively two more to go through. So that's a bit tricky. So I've got my two wires which are going to go to the switch through the slot in this. Now that means that this can rotate quite a lot, because it has to do that. I think it might be over 180 degrees of rotation. So that's got its rotation ability, and then that'll drop in there. I need to get the spring and little steel ball in there, and my wires run through these bulkheads through a hole I've drilled. It ended up having to be 3mm to get the two wires through because they're quite big, and then these wires will come round and go onto the PCB, which will sit in there. They have to go on top of the PCB, of course. I might try and get them in front of that capacitor, and they go, whoops, they go on this end point on the board and the battery connector. Right, this is how I get the steel ball on the spring. Just cover it over with my finger, push it in and force it into the housing, but it's not going to go this time. Let's get it near the tip of my finger. No, it's gone on the floor. It's not an easy thing to do, but I've got it to go in, and then I just push that home. And that is that hinge done with wires attached. Just got to cut these and solder them onto my connector and PCB module. We're getting there. So my wires go in through the rotating hinge, through the bulkhead, curve round and go to the two connection points. There's another little bit of plastic in here, which means I've had to push this down because there's a little sort of rib in the top of here which has to sit over the top of there. It's all very tight. So now you actually have to rotate these bearings inside these outers, but of course because they're clicky it's hard to do. Now I was using this G-clamp, I was putting the G-clamp on there, but I can't do it now, the wires are in. But amazingly I found this, and it's a perfect fit. It's 13mm and it's thin and it fits on there, and I can use it to click that round, and I think it has to go around 2 clicks so that the ball bearing is right at the bottom, and that means I can then fit the red bits over the black bits, but that's getting ahead of myself a bit. So I've started on the red wires. They're through the bulkhead and out here. They're through the hinge, and now I've got to click that round but not let it fly out at the same time. So try and hold it in while I click it round. And I'm not quite sure where I am with that. I think that might be the last detent. I'll use a torch to try and look down in there and see the ball. This capacitor is right in the way because I want to pull this out a bit now, but my yellow wires are a bit tight and they've got to be lifted up over that capacitor in order to get this out enough to hook onto my two connections which are in there, which is a little bit tricky to get to. And I've prepared those, they're ready to solder on the black and white wires, which will black and red, which will go to the LED plate. So I'm just going to get those soldered on there, close this up, and then that's this bit done. So my 4 wires are on. I've moved the yellows to this side of the capacitor now. Black and red are kind of at a bit of a squiffy angle, but I couldn't get to it very well. But I just want to close this up now, bring this together, if indeed it will go together. Yeah, I think that's got it. Screw that closed with the 2 screws that go in the side here, and that's this done, ready to take all the red bits. Right, the first red piece clips on here, but you've got to get this piece down inside there, and it's got to go in a really funny angle for the first click. and now it's not sitting on those flats which I put my spanner on until I bring it around to that position. Now I think it's indexed with the flats on these, and now I've got to bring the whole thing round 2 clicks so that it's a right angle, which I may be able to... No, I'm not going to be able to get that spanner in anymore, so I'm just going to have to sort of kind of try and force it to bring these round. It's not going to be easy. So by sort of just forcing it round, but I've got to be careful that I don't trap the wires where they go into the black bit. It's hard to explain and I can't see very well what I'm doing on the camera. So this bearing has come round and is flat with this, but this one didn't come round, so I'm just going to try and grip it. Yes, that's brought it round. So that's now the flats are aligned in a line across there. Now that means I can get the front on. Right, I've soldered the 2 yellow wires onto the switch. There was some hot glue on that, but I'm not going to bother because it looks to me like these ribs hold that switch in place. And I've soldered the wires onto the LEDs. Now I need to get the springy thing, this spring and ball, back in here for the rotating lens thing before I finally close the thing up. Right, this thing is finally back together again. That all seems to work. Let's see whether it lights up. This is a live test. Yes, it does. Excellent. I never want to see the inside of this light ever again.